Tonight on Evening Edition, honoring those who sacrificed their lives serving our country.
We just want to honor them one at a time.
We take a look at how our fallen service members were remembered around the country. Plus, a Navy SEAL accused of committing war crimes awaits trial. A look at his charges and the president's effort to pardon him. And thousands of San Diego college students are struggling with homelessness, but a local nonprofit is trying to turn that around. We take a look at how. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. It's Monday, May 27th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Susan Murphy. Across the country, Americans are paying tribute this Memorial Day, recognizing and honoring the lives of the more than 1 million men and women who have died in military service since the Civil War. Here in San Diego, veterans set up a memorial in front of the USS Midway. KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar introduces us to the movement behind the memorial.
David Herrera, 26, Sergeant, U.S. Army.
89-year-old Stan Levin is a Navy veteran of the Korean War.
Donald James Hogan, 20, Lance Corporal, U.S. Marine Corps.
Every year for the past 6 years, he and his colleagues from the San Diego Veterans for Peace organization read the names of service members from Southern California who have died in the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts. He says reading those names isn't easy.
There's a couple things that trigger me a little bit. Just flashbacks at what happened, where I was, what I was doing. It's something you just never get over.
But it's important.
We just want to honor them one at a time.
His friend Jim Brown thinks so too. He's a Marine Corps veteran of the Vietnam War.
I got wounded over there. I was in combat quite a bit, and I watched people die around me. I've visited their graves.
This year, there are 288 headstones set in front of the USS Midway and laid out to look like Arlington National Cemetery.
This is one of the first guys to actually have died over in Iraq. He was killed. He wasn't even in country 3 days, and he was on a bomb detail where they go and check out unexploded ordnance, like bombs buried or rounds that didn't go off. And he got blown away from that.
Brown says he feels a sense of duty to do this every year.
I think I'll be doing this here the rest of my life. I just feel driven to do it. To honor these people is part of my penance, for having gone to war and killed people and dealt with that stuff. And it helps. It helps to read their names.
Jason Hill, 20, Lance Corporal, U.S. Marine Corps.
The two men hope that this symbolic cemetery will give people a chance to remember the sacrifices that have been made this Memorial Day. Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
Navy SEAL Chief Eddie Gallagher is awaiting trial here in San Diego for accusations of war crimes. Members of his own unit are scheduled to testify against him. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh has been covering the case, which has drawn attention all the way to the White House. I spoke with him about the trial today. Eddie Gallagher is on trial for war crimes. What is he accused of doing?
So this happened back in 2017 in Mosul. He's accused of killing a wounded teenage ISIS fighter who was in his custody. He's also accused of killing an elderly man and a young woman using his sniper rifle.
Members of his own unit are set to testify against him.
This is true. So 7 SEALs have been granted immunity. Now, his defense attorney will say that some of those SEALs may help exonerate Eddie Gallagher, but these are all members who are under his command. Now, also there were text messages, and they show Eddie Gallagher posing with a dead body with the caption, "I got him with my knife."
The case has attracted a great deal of attention. Congressman Duncan Hunter has lobbied on Gallagher's behalf. President Trump has gotten involved. What's happening here?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of publicity in this case. After he was taken into custody on September 11th, 2018, his family started going on on Fox News. A number of congressmen got involved. They signed a petition where they asked him to be removed from the brig, and then ultimately President Trump tweeted out that he should be moved to less restrictive confinement.
The New York Times reports the White House is considering a pardon of Gallagher and others, possibly today on Memorial Day. What's the status?
So, Susan, so far no pardons have come out, but we do know from some of the reporting that's out there that the White House has requested the file of Gallagher and some others and is considering a pardon. It could come today or maybe in the next couple of days. We do know that there's been a lot of pushback in the last week since that New York Times article came out. A lot of military leaders have questioned the whole idea of short-circuiting the military justice system and the implications for that. I actually talked to Gallagher's attorney, Tim Parlatore, outside one of the court hearings for Gallagher last week, and I asked him about his position on whether or not he would accept a pardon.
Ultimately, my goal, my primary duty is to get my client home to his family and to have him, not be facing jail time. So if offered a pardon, would he accept? I bet he would.
But he acknowledged that there is some stigma attached to going ahead and getting a pardon over actually going through the judicial process. Before all this news of a pardon broke, I talked with Gary Barthel. He's a retired Marine Corps JAG officer, and he's also a military lawyer in San Diego. He said that prosecuting a highly decorated Navy SEAL for war crimes actually sends an important message.
Not all countries have rules of engagement, and we do. The other reason that we have rules of engagement is that we want the world to know that, we're a country that abides by these rules. And if we're captured as a prisoner by the enemy, we would expect that they would treat our prisoners just as we would treat theirs.
Gallagher's trial has been delayed. What's happening in the case?
So it has been delayed. It was scheduled to begin tomorrow. Instead, there's going to be a hearing coming up on Wednesday. Now, another one of the wrinkles in this case is there have been accusations by the defense that the prosecutors were spying on them. There have been a number of leaks in this case. Literally hundreds of pages of court documents have leaked out to the New York Times and Navy Times. And at some point, prosecutors installed a tracking software on emails sent to the defense and to reporters. The defense is calling that spying, so there will be a hearing on Wednesday to talk about whether or not either the judge or the prosecutors will have to recuse themselves. But if that doesn't happen, this trial could begin really by the end of the week.
And Steve, I know you'll be attending the trial and keeping us updated. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks, Susan.
A local nonprofit is taking on the problem of student homelessness. KPBS reporter Milena Spitzer shows us how the Wesley House is helping the city's vulnerable student population.
Derek Patterson, an art student at SDSU, shows me around his one-bedroom apartment full of artwork.
And my mom really wants it, so I have to finish it.
Derek says he's grateful to live at Wesley House after having experienced homelessness earlier in his life.
Of course, having my own place is a huge thing for me. It's because it was embarrassing, having to ask people to stay over and stuff like that. And it's nice to be able to offer that to people, a place to stay and stuff.
The Wesley House is located on the edge of the SDSU campus, and it has room for 34 students. It provides affordable housing and support services aimed at college students. Derek says being homeless was probably the worst time in his life. He had to couch surf, experienced hunger, and had to sleep outside a few times during the winter. Derek isn't alone in this experience. Wesley House Director of Development Nicole Markell says there are currently more than 3,000 unsheltered students at San Diego State University. And the problem is worse at community colleges.
The situation in San Diego within the community college system is about double that. So about 10% of students in the CSU and UC system experience homelessness, and approximately 20% of students in the community colleges throughout California experience homelessness. So it's an alarming and growing crisis.
In addition to homeless youth, Wesley House serves students from other vulnerable populations. That includes former foster youth, first-generation college students, and formerly incarcerated students like Derek. He says the need for shelter and money led him to commit armed robbery, and he ended up in prison. After serving his time, he couldn't find a place to live. He was rejected from 3 apartments because of his criminal record. He says Wesley House is helping him turn his life around.
I'd really rather kind of like make it on my own, and I mean the motivation is just from my past. It's like, okay, time to turn a new page, you know, like become a better person and like kind of be self-reliant. So it's definitely been possible through this place for sure.
Wesley House provides support services like financial training, mentorship, and food assistance. But with no end in sight to the housing crisis, this nonprofit hopes to expand its reach, partnering with developers to create even more affordable housing for students in need. Milena Spitzer, KPBS News.
Tomorrow we'll meet a resident of Wesley House who was the first of his family to go to college. Now his goal is to put his parents through school. At least 35 migrants at a downtown San Diego shelter are sick with suspected flu cases. That's more than double the number of cases since county health officials announced the outbreak last week. County officials say 14 of the ill migrants are being quarantined with their family at downtown hotels. They say all of the migrants staying at the San Diego shelter were flown in from border processing centers in Texas, where the H1N1 flu strain is circulating. Officials say the migrants receive medical exams when they first arrive at the shelter to check for communicable diseases. As an added precaution, they're now screened every day for flu symptoms such as fevers and congestion. The county will release daily updates of flu cases until the outbreak is over. It was a little rainy and cloudy this weekend, but the sun came out just in time for the holiday. Let's get the forecast for the rest of the week with meteorologist Erin Calandra.
Thanks for joining us. I hope you had a wonderful Memorial Day. Things are looking a bit better here in Southern California. Notice all this precipitation out across the deserts. We are seeing some mountain snow. It is unusual for this time of year, but we're going to be drying out here in San Diego. We had a couple of showers in spots this morning, a couple of clouds around, but that is all going to be moving away, and we'll return to our typical pattern here. Taking a look at tonight, 57 degrees, turning cloudy. And that's what you should expect across the region. Oceanside at 48 with clouds, Chula Vista at 54. Not as many clouds in those interior areas. Mount Laguna, 40 degrees tonight for the low. This week, we'll see improvement. Temperatures near normal by midweek. It's going to be drier and a lot more pleasant. Let's take a look at what's going on. Well, 70 in Oceanside, Ramona at 70 degrees, San Diego 68, mostly sunny, and Borrego Springs 88 degrees, looking good. The jet stream is still going to be cruising around us. A big trough in the jet stream here. That's why we're seeing that cold air, those storms coming in. That's still going to be the case midweek, but the good news is we are seeing some improvement. So sunshine this week. We're going to see temperatures close to 70 degrees for our highs each day along the coast. Inland, slightly warmer. The warmest day of the week will be Thursday at 78 degrees. And in the deserts, we're in the 90s, reaching 95 on Friday. Make sure you're drinking lots of water and take breaks. Cool down when you can. The mountains much more comfortable in the 60s. The warmest day of the week will be Thursday, and again on Saturday, reaching 66 degrees, and it's going to remain nice and sunny. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Back to you.
SeaWorld opened its newest attraction this weekend, the third in the last few years. KPBS reporter John Carroll shows us how the park has turned around record low attendance to record highs.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tidal Twister is officially open!
The ribbon cutting for SeaWorld's latest attraction, Tidal Twister, marks more than just the addition of a new ride.
SeaWorld's made a turnaround. Their attendance is up double digit this year.
San Diego State marketing professor George Belch keeps a close eye on what draws tourists to San Diego County.
We weren't told much about it other than it was trainer error.
SeaWorld was already struggling when the documentary Blackfish premiered in 2013. The movie pushed the park's attendance numbers even further down. But Belch says, to their credit, they addressed the bad news in a number of ways.
They stopped breeding the orcas in captivity. They got rid of the Shamu shows. They made it a more environmentally friendly and conscious place to come. They had a campaign, SeaWorld Cares. They showed the great things they do with animal rescue and marine conservation. They didn't just walk away from it. They tried to address it head on.
Belch says in addition to the bad publicity surrounding Blackfish, SeaWorld simply wasn't competing in a serious way with other theme parks.
You can't just sit still. You just can't sit there and say, okay, I'll try to give people the same old thing and hope that they'll come, give them some discounts. No, you have to give them a reason to come and give them good experiences.
SeaWorld opened its Manta ride in 2013, followed by Electric Eel last year, and now Tidal Twister. Though animal activists still say visitors should shun the park because it keeps animals in captivity, Belch says the investments position SeaWorld for a bright future.
They've addressed the controversies. They've recognized that they're going to have to change their marine shows, and they've done that.
Another ride called Mako is slated to open next year. John Carroll, KPBS News.
From SeaWorld to sea dragons, La Jolla is now home to one of the largest sea dragon exhibits in the world. KPBS reporter Lynn Walsh visited Birch Aquarium's newest permanent exhibit and learned finding the sea creatures can sometimes be like a game of I Spy.
They're such an unusual looking fish.
Leslie Matsushike is an associate curator at Birch Aquarium. She's been working with sea dragons for over 20 years.
They're just really fun to watch. They just, with the sea dragons, they just drift back and forth. It's almost mesmerizing to watch them swim.
Floating inside more than 5,000 gallons of water are two different species of sea dragons.
A sea dragon, yeah, look at that.
Leafy and weedy. They're surrounded by coral and swaying seaweed, meant to remind them of their natural habitat in southern Australia. The leafy sea dragons are yellow-greenish in color, and with all of their appendages are easily mistaken as floating seaweed. No other aquarium has successfully bred them, something Matsushike says she hopes will change.
The leafy sea dragons have been courting actively, and they do this little twirling dance where they circle around each other, and they do it quite often, especially around sunrise and sunset.
Breeding leafy sea dragons is a primary goal of the new exhibit.
Because it hasn't been done, we would love to be the first to do that.
She says the small range in which they live makes them vulnerable to environmental changes.
We are just trying to be proactive and learning how to keep them in captivity in case there is issues in the natural habitat.
The aquarium has 3 leafy sea dragons, 2 male and 1 female. In addition to sea dragons, the new exhibit features several species of seahorses, and some have recently given birth. Lynn Walsh, KPBS News.
A zoo in Sydney is helping to save an unusual but popular animal from extinction, the bilby. Take a look at how conservationists are trying to repopulate the big-eared desert-dwelling marsupials.
Sleep all day, and they come out at night.
In Australia, it's the bilby that brings treats at Easter, not a bunny. But there's increasing fear among conservationists that what is arguably Australia's most loved marsupial may disappear if action is not taken to save it.
Unfortunately, bilbies are almost extinct.
According to the Australian Wildlife Conservancy, the last report of bilbies in the wild in New South Wales was back in 1912, making them effectively extinct in the area. The threat is largely from feral cats and foxes. Now, after years of trapping and removing of rabbits, foxes, and cats, some of the native animals are roaming freely again. A giant fence also sits on the landscape, hoping to aid a comeback of the bilby.
We've got 2 big exclosures to keep out the ferals. They're 4 by 5 kilometres each. Fences are up to 2 metres. And essentially what we've been doing is building those fences and getting rid of the ferals.
The bilbies living at the Taronga Zoo in Sydney will hopefully be released into the wild. These children are having a lesson on why that's so important.
We're teaching them to live in the wild, duck when the eagle flies over, all those sorts of life skills that you need when you go back into the desert.
Some bilbies have previously been released into the predator-proof park, and more will be added in the coming months along with other animals.
We've got 7 species. We've got 2 bandicoot species. We've got crestel mulgaras. We've got western quolls. We've got stick-nest rats. But it's much more than that, because we think these animals are absolutely going to transform this desert.
The Australian Wildlife Conservancy anticipates that a population of around 850 bilbies will form in the area over the next few years.
African American infants are twice as likely to die as white infants. That's according to the Center for Disease Control. But doctors and nurses at the USC Medical Center are working to change that. PBS SoCal reporter Bonnie Boswell shows us how.
Hello, I'm Bonnie Boswell. Well, it is a national tragedy. Today, in the United States, there are more infant deaths than in most developed countries. One reason for high mortality is the number of babies born too soon. The Center for Disease Control says 1/3 of infant deaths are due to preterm causes. Dr. Ragasamy Ramanathan knows about caring for high-risk babies. Dr. Ram, as he's called, directs the newborn intensive care unit at Los Angeles County and USC Medical Center.
I can show you, this is one of the set of triplets born to an African American family.
Stacy Quintero and Sean Housen had a high-risk pregnancy.
She couldn't continue the pregnancy beyond 20 weeks, so they were able to put a cerclage. They started on a medication to stop the labor, progesterone, from the beginning.
So otherwise she could have only carried it 20 weeks.
20 weeks, 18 weeks, especially triplets, she could have lost them. And as soon as she realized she has triplets, she went to high-risk pregnancy clinic at LA County.
Okay.
And we followed this mom and the fetuses even before they were born on a weekly basis.
It was a hard journey, to be honest, but I mean, they made it 31 weeks and they're here and they're good.
When they brought them to the NICU, they had these little tubes in their nose for breathing now. They had them on the machines, and like 3 days later, they off.
I feel blessed to have ended up here. I mean, I went from one hospital to another, and I honestly think it's the best.
So how are you feeling now about all
Happy.
this?
Excited. I got to hold one of my babies.
Yeah.
With that care from high-risk obstetricians, and then we were prepared, and this little one, B, started acting out. Baby's heart rate started to go down, so we ended up taking all 3 of them out.
Because Stacy and Sean got good medical care early, the triplets were born closer to full term. Dr. Ram calls this unit the Magic Kingdom. He says it's because a lot of magic happens here.
President Trump says the U.S. is not ready to make a trade deal with China. He spoke about the current standoff today from Tokyo. But the trade war continues affecting the U.S. Carrie Annelfinger from the Associated Press shows us how it's hurting the bicycle industry.
I have to think a second. I have 1, 2, 3.
It's safe to say 4, Sean Shields is a bike enthusiast.
5 right now.
He's always on the lookout for better models, but lately he's backpedaled.
I'm not going to buy a bike right now until things settle down.
He's referring to the trade war between the world's 2 biggest economies, the U.S. and China. Tensions have recently intensified, with the U.S. more than doubling tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese imports to 25%. The bicycle industry, which imports more than 90% of bikes and bike parts from China, has been hit hard.
And what it's done is it's thrown this in complete uncertainty into the market, from manufacturing side to the purchasing side to hiring to investing.
Milwaukee-based Fixation Bicycle Company designs its own bikes, parts, and accessories. Ginster looked into alternative manufacturing locations after the 10% tariff last year, but he had few choices that wouldn't be affected by the tariffs.
Now, that industry lives and breathes in China. It doesn't exist anywhere else.
So far, they've absorbed the extra cost from the 10% tariff, but Ginster estimates the increase to 25% could cost them $200,000 in 2020. So hiring and any expansions are on hold, and they expect prices to go up.
I mean, if we're a small company of 12 people and we're considering scaling back, I can't imagine companies with thousands of people. I mean, they're having the same conversations, and it's significant.
Over at South Shore Cyclery, they stocked up on extra inventory in anticipation of the increased tariffs.
When that stock runs low, we'll have to see where prices are at, so that may make a difference as far as what models we continue with or decide to change.
He's already seen riders shifting their attention to used bikes or getting their old bikes repaired. Prices increased after the first tariffs, reflected in this newer model. A newer model usually sees an increase, but not this much.
These are about like $360, and a very similar bike, different color, not much change. We're looking at about like $390 on this guy, so more increase than typical by a couple times.
And further price increases are expected.
Prices go up, they usually don't just come right back down, so there's going to be a ripple in the water for a while.
With no fix on the horizon. Carrie Antlefinger, Associated Press, Milwaukee.
You stumbled upon an opportunity. I can make you rich. Rich enough to impress a princess. What would I have to do?
Moviegoers have voted with their dollars and chosen the familiar over the new this Memorial Day weekend. Walt Disney's live-action remake of Aladdin has crushed the competition at the box office, including the critically acclaimed teen comedy Booksmart and the horror movie Brightburn. On Sunday, Aladdin grossed an estimated $86.1 million to take the top spot in North America. It's expected to pass $100 million by the end of today. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. We're leaving you with a clip from the wreath-laying ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. Have a great evening.